Welcome to the Intentional Encourager podcast, where each episode brings you compelling conversations and stories designed to entertain, enlighten, and encourage. And now here's your host, Brian Sexton.
Hey everybody, Brian Sexton. I am intentionally encouraged when I see people doing business the right way. And for the last 15 years, Damon Burton and his team at SEO National have done just that. Now you might say, Brian, what can they do for me in my business? I'm going to tell you what they can do for you. They can help you understand search engine optimization. There are a lot of players out there in the marketplace, but you want a team of people that are going to be dedicated to working with you and helping you to understand search engine optimization and how you can show up higher on search engines so that you can bring more revenue into your business. Damon and his team are full of integrity, honesty, decency, and trust. And if that's important to you and that encourages you, I would encourage you to give them a call today at 855-736-6285 or go to SEOnational.com and get a free quote and tell them you heard about it on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Get ready for a dynamite conversation coming up right now on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
And welcome into the Intentional Encourager podcast. I'm your host, Brian Sexton. Thank you for joining us again today. We've got a special two-part. For those of you that live in West Virginia, two parts. I have got my dear friend Kevin Ward. You can follow him on LinkedIn at WKevinWard because he can't take any more followers. He's maxed out. LinkedIn has maxed him out. But you can also see his Wisdom Seeker podcast every Monday, most every Monday, unless it's a holiday or something like that. But right now, you can find him right here on the Intentional Encourager podcast as we talk about the encouragement of wisdom. And nobody better to talk to than Kevin about that. Kevin, how are you today, my friend?
I am blessed, Brian, very blessed. God's continuing to work in my life and continue, even at my age, growing in wisdom and knowledge. And so I'm grateful for all that I have and all that I am.
Well, I'm not going to guess about our combined ages on here. I know I'm going to be 50 in August, so I know that part, but
might require a calculator at some point in that process.
Or an abacus, you never know.
Yeah, there
an
you
abacus, go. You know, that way. Listen, I'm not smart enough to work a calculator, so it's going to have to be an abacus or something like that. So. I live in West Virginia, man. I'm not, they don't. We're not sharp as knives in the drawer. So, but let's start here, Kevin. I am smart enough to recognize one thing, and that is the power of wisdom and the intentional encouragement in wisdom. I am smart enough to realize that. I want to go here. I want to go back before we go forward. When did you first realize the power of wisdom in your own life and your need for it? Because you are so intentional about, and I use that word intentionally, and I'm not trying to play on words here or anything like that. You are very intentional about wisdom and promoting wisdom. So when did you first understand its power in your own life?
Well, my first exposure, of course, is reading Proverbs and just looking at all that Proverbs has to offer. And as I began to, reading the words and understanding the words is not wisdom. It is just a place of knowledge. And it's the first step in the process, but it's not get there. And so with time, to answer your question, I don't have a specific event per se. It's just over time, I've come to realize that Proverbs tells us that be slow to anger, for example. And it took me a while to understand how to apply that wisdom. And as I have applied it more and more, it feeds on itself, because when you gain wisdom and start applying it in your life, it changes things for you. It motivates you to do it more because another one is being slow to speak. Proverbs tells us very clearly to be slow to speak. And once I started learning to be slower to speak, then I got myself in a lot less trouble, and relationships improved with that. And so, but the initial exposure had to be Proverbs. I mean, that's just the way it is, because the book of Proverbs is just chock full of wisdom. I mean, the whole Bible is, obviously, but the book of Proverbs is just full of wisdom. And then I think the other revelation about it, if you will, is understanding that we'll all get some wisdom unless we're just really working hard not to. Okay. But on the same score, if we work hard to gain wisdom, then we are going to be blessed and get a lot more wisdom in that process, because scriptures tell us to seek wisdom like gold. And once I started really applying the concept of seeking wisdom, then that was a major turning point.
I love what you said about being slow to anger. And as we record this, Kevin, I am in within about 20 minutes of where a shooting happened in a grocery store in Buffalo, New York. That's where I am as we record this episode. And then for time purposes, if folks will go back and listen to this episode, for time purposes, we're about a week removed from a shooting in Uvalde, Texas, with at the elementary school. There is a lot of anger in our society right now. Gas prices are going through the roof. Food prices are going through the roof, and food not being on the shelf. It feels like there is a lot of anger right now in our world, in our society. Why do you feel like, and I want to go here for just a second.
Okay.
The Bible says, and you're exactly right, the Bible, as you correctly pointed out, be slow to anger. We have a society that's got a quick trigger, no pun intended. I mean, no disrespect for what we've talked about, but it's a euphemism.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a quick trigger when it comes to anger, whether it's on social media, whether it's on other things. Why do you feel like, and what do you see from your experience that has caused our society to become so quick triggered when it comes to anger?
Oh, that's an easy one. Learned this principle years ago. And that principle is that most of the time when we get anger, indicates that we have a right that we think we have that has been violated. And what I have had to learn is that as a believer, that I have yielded all of my rights when I died with Christ. And so when I get angry, I'm taking a right back and saying, you have violated my right, and it's making me mad. And we have, as a culture, developed so much of a mindset of we are owed so much and we have so many rights that it's not surprising that we stay angry, because there's always people there to violate one of our rights.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love what you said there, Kevin, because I believe this. We allow ourselves to be provoked very easily.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we would call it in West Virginia, we would call it poking the bear.
Yeah.
You know, well, don't poke the bear. Don't poke. My dad always told me that, like, don't poke the bear. Don't poke the bear. But it feels like with social media, and I want to call that out especially, because you have shared a lot of wisdom around correct disciplines and habits and practices around social media, and I have a lot of respect. I've said this to you privately, and I'm going to say it publicly. I have a lot of respect for a lot of your teachings and wisdom nuggets that you have dropped around that, and it feels like that social media has given us the one place that we can trigger our own anger and feel good about releasing that anger, like spewing. You would never, forgive me for kind of dropping back and punting here, Kevin, you'd never walk into somebody's house and just start vomiting all over their house.
Mm-hmm.
You just wouldn't do that. But we think nothing of if somebody cuts us off in traffic or somebody's rude to us or things like that. we'll hop on that cell phone and just, I'm mad and I'm going to tell everybody about it. And it just feels like that we have not applied the same principles.
Well, the challenge with social media is it gives us a sense of anonymity. Okay. And I can apply the same principle because my challenge in controlling my anger is in a car, because I struggle with that and I continue to pray and grow to a point. My goal is to a point that I will not react any different to that driver and then if I were standing there with that person. And because when we're in a car and we get upset, we feel like got some anonymity, and same thing with social media, because if need be, we can hide behind the words and never show our face. The key is that the wise way to approach things is don't do anything either in a car or on social media or in other places that you would not do in front of the person that is being the object of your response. And when we do that, it changes things. It changes things completely because there is rare moment that most people would do what they do on social media if they were standing face to face with the person involved.
Hey everybody, Brian Sexton. Prices are going up by the day. We've got to find ways to increase our household revenue. Now, a couple ways you could do that is, one, you could go and ask your boss for a raise. But if that doesn't work, I've got another way for you. It's my friend Joe Hart's program called Products for Profit. Joe's been a guest here on the Intentional Encourager podcast and told his story about how learning retail arbitrage changed his life, and he's been helping thousands of people change theirs. Now, retail arbitrage is simply this. It's taking a product and buying it and then reselling it online for a higher price, and you keep the profits. And guess what? Amazon and Walmart use third-party resellers every day to fulfill their customer orders. I want you to go to productsforprofit.com or productsforprofit.carrd.co. Get connected to Joe's team. Tell him you heard about it on the Intentional Encourager podcast and start making money today with Products for Profit. And now let's get back to more great conversation on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
That is so true because, again, and people, we've taken this term keyboard warrior, and we've said, well, that person's a keyboard warrior. I don't want to be a keyboard warrior like a lot of people are keyboard warriors, because what happens is the wise man, the Bible says, builds his house upon a rock. In other words, they know where the cracks are in the foundation. Right. They know how that rock is laid out, and they're going to try to put some things in that rock to smooth out the cracks. And in the Bible days, they didn't have those things, so they had to trust that where they set those posts on the rock, it had to hold. And so nowadays, it's more incumbent, I believe, for us to know where the cracks are in our foundation so that we're not intentionally triggering things that are going to cause catastrophic failure. You work with clients every day. You work with people. You coach people. You have a lot of wisdom. What tends to cause wisdom to stress in those moments and cause us, because you just said it, and forgive me for the long-winded question. You just said it, those pressure points.
Yeah.
Those trigger moments where we tend to lose the wisdom that we have built and gained in those moments. So let me ask it this way. How do we keep ourselves wise when those trigger points are hit like they are?
One of the simplest things is to begin to have the self-discipline not to respond quickly. Rarely do we need to respond in such a way quickly to be effective in our response. In fact, that's what I call reacting. The key is that we don't want to react most of the time, because we don't need to react most of the time. We have time to respond, may have a measured response. And one of the key differences between taking knowledge and understanding is that when we make the leap to wisdom is when we see things from a different perspective. We see things from a perspective outside of ourselves. And for us as believers, the goal is to see everything and everybody through God's eyes. And when we take the time to, because it's not completely natural, it's something that takes renewal and growth. But when we begin to take that perspective and take that minute to look at it differently than just what's going on in the heat of the moment, we will find that we are living wisdom a lot more often. Simple thing, count down or take deep breaths. Those two real easy tips.
Well, Kevin, here's what I was thinking about when you were saying that. There is a level of wisdom that we have garnered in our world today that is not healthy. And it's called, the Bible puts it this way. And for those of you that are not a Christian, look, Kevin and I are both Christians, so we see things through the biblical perspective. The Bible says they're wise in their own eyes. Mm-hmm. Everything that you think you see, well, I'm correct. I know I'm correct. And I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to tell everybody else, I'm correct, and everybody else is not correct in this situation. I've been there at times, and when you're proven wrong, you do look very foolish, and it's because you don't take that moment, as you were talking about, to count down, to step back and things like that. It seems to me that we have become a society of folks being wise in their own eyes. Do you see that same thing in society, and what's a correctable action that we can do to move away from that?
Well, it's very evident, and it's happened not by happenstance, okay, because there was a time where wisdom was a premium sought after. It was a priority. Then in a point in time in our culture, we shifted to what we referred to as a knowledge-based society. And what has happened is the premium now is on the knowledge. And in the journey to wisdom, knowledge is the very basic step. And we even go so far as to say knowledge is power. No, knowledge isn't power. You can have all kinds of knowledge, but if you don't know how to use it and use it well, not only is it not powerful, but it can actually be harmful to you. And so our focus on knowledge over the rest of the process and learning wisdom is really hurting us to a point that we have a lot of people that don't seek out wisdom and really don't care. And one of the indicators of that, it's become common statement that common sense isn't so common anymore. I'll use the grammatically correct version there instead of the Southern version. And
thank you. I appreciate
that. And more as I've really evaluated and considered that, I realized that common sense is another way of saying that we've grown in wisdom. Common sense is a byproduct of seeking wisdom.
Yeah.
If we do the same thing over and over and never seek the wisdom of it, but it goes wrong, we'll keep doing it wrong.
Well, Kevin, everybody, forgive me for interrupting, everybody seems to be a counselor today. We've got a lot of people that just ask them. They're a counselor. They've got the answers. They know all the answers. And listen, there's never been a better time. I want to go here and please forgive me for interrupting.
No, go ahead.
But here's what I see. There is so much expertise out there that people feel like can be monetized upon. Mm-hmm. Well, I know this, and so therefore I'm going to monetize it. And there are wonderful people that are doing great things. Don't get me wrong. But not everybody's got the answer. And not everybody is wise in that respect. And I posted something a couple of days ago. I feel like, I believe I've got as much expertise as anybody out there when it comes to sales and sales management and connection and relationship building and things like that. I don't feel like I need to take a backseat to anybody. But here's the thing that I believe for myself, and I can't speak for anybody else. I can only speak for me. Where I have a discernible difference and where I can really show wisdom is in showing and demonstrating a life of intentional encouragement. And that's where that's why this podcast exists, is because I looked out on LinkedIn, where you and I hang out a lot. Mm-hmm. I saw a lot of expertise, but I didn't see it. I didn't see much encouragement. And I thought, I can feel that. I can not feel F-E-E-L, but I can feel F-I-L. I can feel that. And I believe that wisdom starts with knowing where you can apply what you know. We seem to lack the ability for application. And that's where I want to take us here for just a minute. When you look back at the times in your life that you've really applied wisdom, what does it take to apply the wisdom that you gain? And how hard was it for you to apply it in those situations?
What does it take? Big difference is seeing whatever situation, not just as how it affects me. I've got to take myself out of the picture, or well, not remove myself, but I've got to take more than myself into consideration to make wise choices. That's one of the key components, because the value of seeing things through God's eyes is I'm no longer looking at me. I'm looking at others. I'm looking even at me through God's eyes. And so removing myself or adding others into the picture other than myself is the key. And, again, Proverbs tells us, okay, and people kind of gloss over this, but really felt convicted that this is not something to gloss over. And that is a sequence. It says, seek knowledge first, then understanding, and then wisdom. And that's where I have built all that I do from the Wisdom Seeker and any other counsel, is to follow that progression.
Hey everybody, Brian Sexton. You know, dreams are powerful pieces of intentional encouragement. We all have them. If you're a business owner, you've probably always dreamed of taking your sales to levels you've never seen before. I've got a guy that can help you with that. His name is Brad Norwood. My good buddy Brad has been on the Intentional Encourager podcast as a guest before, and he is a dream specialist. His company, Dream It Pro, offers incentive packages to travel to places such as the Masters, Kentucky Derby, the Super Bowl, even exotic places that you've always wanted to take your team, but you just didn't know how to do it. Brad's your guy. And oh, by the way, Brad's a certified bucket list coach, so he can help your team members achieve their personal dreams as well. I want you to go to www.dreamitpro.com and find out more, or call him directly at 479-466-6907. And by the way, tell him you heard it on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Let's get back to more great conversation here on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
And when we do that, again, the key difference when we go from understanding, which is based on experience. You know, I tried that once and it went south.
Yeah.
And hopefully, I'm not going to do stupid again. Some of us are a little slower. We have to do it several times to get it.
Well, right here. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But the key is taking that experience and going, okay, how does this not only affect me, how does it affect others, and how does it affect my relationship to God?
Well, and Kevin, I love how you framed that, and I wrote that down, the wisdom sequence.
Yes.
And here's what I love about what you said, and here's what I'm extrapolating out of that. Understanding is different than wisdom. It's much different. I understand how brain surgery works. I'm not going to go try to perform it.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, a lot of people, yeah. Well, some people would say, well, you need to start on yourself. That's called a lobotomy. So, but no, you understand, because here's the thing that I extrapolated out of that. In our world today, if you want to understand anything, literally anything, there is a popular site called YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
People make videos. And I had a guy in my church tell me, he said, Brian, I've learned a ton of stuff watching YouTube videos.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can gain great understanding on just about anything in life that you want to do. You've got a great virtual background there of the Golden Gate Bridge that was constructed in the 1930s. The engineering marvel of that is astounding. The wisdom that we supposedly have today in 2022, we should be able to replicate that and build that bridge much better. But the fact that it's still standing, that's wisdom, because their level of application of knowledge, correct application, that if you would ask me to define wisdom, I'm going to ask you to define wisdom. If I would define wisdom to me, and I want to see how close I can get to it,
okay,
I would define wisdom as the correct application of the right understanding. That's how I see wisdom. How do you define wisdom?
Well, okay, I like that. That's succinct. And I think that wisdom is taking the knowledge we've got, the understanding we've gained through experience, and then how to use that knowledge base and experience in any given situation in a way that is going to ultimately, again, as a believer, bring honor to God.
Wow, I like that.
In the absence of someone, there are people I know that are going to hear this, that's not something they're concerned with, but that the application is such a way that it is most effective in taking care of us as well as those around us and those coming down the road in the future, our children, our grandchildren.
Yeah.
It's just that we have to look beyond knowledge and understanding, and how do we use it? And that's, wisdom is art. Wisdom is really an art form. It's not something that that anyone can give you the 5 easy steps, the 7 great habits to have wisdom. It's not. It's an art form. And I'll give you an example. Okay. I recently went through a process. You and I chatted a little bit about this offline.
Yep.
And I work on my own car a lot because, first of all, it challenges me, and it's good challenge. The other is that I have some skepticism about intentions of some businesses, shall we say.
Yep.
So anyway, my car recently, I gained some knowledge, and the knowledge was that one of the fuel injectors on the car was a problem. Okay. And it took me a while. I had to read and look and read codes and on a computer checker and all that. So that was knowledge. That was my starting point. So then I went through a process of, okay, can I change this thing? And can I buy the part and so on? So I went through the process and gained some understanding that these injectors can range anywhere in cost. You can buy a used one for under $100, and some of the new ones are upwards of $600, and all in between. Okay, so I gained some understanding there. And I also gained some understanding that how you extract these things to replace them is got its own uniqueness. And there are a multitude of tools and techniques and things like that to do so. One of YouTube, I'm a firm believer in the use of YouTube to gain understanding. I went and checked, and some people said, "Oh, well, you use this tool and you get it out." So okay. Another guy says, "Okay, if you just tap on it a little bit on each side and lift up on it, it'll come out." And then another one says, "Oh, well, use this tool." And there were a multitude of those. Mm-hmm. And so what I ultimately had to understand and gained a little wisdom in, it can be extracted. There is no one method that is going to work every time. And so you have to go through some processes and think through and really be intentional to learn to find out. And so now, at least for that injector, I have developed some wisdom about how to approach that. Now, when it comes time for the next injector, that wisdom may or may not work in that case. The understanding is the same.
Right.
The knowledge is the same, but what I do with that knowledge and understanding with a little bit different situation is where I begin to gain wisdom.
I like what you said about the process, though, of wisdom.
Yeah.
And that's what I wrote down was, I'm trying to run through the scenario in my head and knowing a little bit about auto mechanics. I'm thinking to myself, okay, he's got to drop the fuel tank, and that part has to come in a certain way because when it was manufactured originally, that part went in a certain way. Mm-hmm. And knowing a little bit about that myself from the starting and charging system, having sold those component parts and complete units, I understand that there are some intricacies that work certain ways in auto mechanics. You have to be, and people look at it, and I want to go here for just a minute. People look at it and they say, well, that guy's a regular grease monkey. Boy, he or she just really knows their way around a car. And a lot of it is the delicate intricacies and understanding and being able to apply the delicate idiosyncrasies, because every car operates differently. You could have an engine that is put on an assembly line, and they could do 100 engines an hour, and every engine is going to have its own little idiosyncrasies, its own things about it. Go ahead.
Yeah, the other factor is you can take the same model, the same engine, the same part, everything being the same, but depending on how that vehicle was driven, what conditions it's been through, different things begin to factor in. And what wisdom does is it helps you to consider the other aspects of it. The book says if you go to that part, you take these parts out of the way, you connect this device to remove it, and it all comes out. Okay? That's your knowledge, because that's what, if you go by the textbook, that's what it says. It'll even tell you should take X amount of time. Then what happens is you take that knowledge and you apply it, and you get to the point and you say, okay, I'm going to pull it out. And for instance, in this case that I had to learn is this super nice tool that's supposed to remove it won't fit on that injector in that car that way. It's not room. So then I had to back up and go, okay, so what are my options? And by taking that knowledge and that understanding, then looking at it in a bigger picture, what factors in, what's affected this, and so on, then I began to have some wisdom about it. Now, the interesting thing, I have gained wisdom about this number 6 injector on this particular engine. But if I have to go back and replace one of the others, I'm going to have to gain some new wisdom there, because different factors have come into play. So book and knowledge and all that's great. But if you don't have some understanding to then look at it and bigger perspective, then you're going to be limited. And to a point, to give you additional perspective, there are times, and I've worked on machinery all my life. Okay, that's just, God, I can't sing and I can't dance, but if it's a machine, I can figure it out and fix it usually.
Yeah.
But there are times that after trying to figure out a problem on a machine, a car, whatever, that I get too close. Okay. And I've lost that perspective, and I go to someone else that has that bigger perspective. And I say, I've done this and this and this. What do you think? And it's not uncommon. They go, oh, well, did you try this? Because they had gained some wisdom that I had not, and it was there to share. Now, I could have said, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm going to do it my way, and kept struggling and frustrated and everything else, and had to learn the hard way. Part of my hope and having the Wisdom Seeker podcast is that all of us can learn from each other. Yeah. And we can gain wisdom without doing it the hard way. Now, I'm not practiced at that as much as I'd like. I tend to have to do it the hard way, but I'm trying, and I'm hoping to help others begin to recognize that if you need some wisdom, it may be somebody in your life. It may be a family member. It may be a friend, a pastor, a mentor that has some wisdom that if you just go to them with the right attitude and a servant's heart, you may gain some wisdom without having to go through the pain.
No, that's 100% correct. And again, I want to park the conversation here because on the next part of this podcast, it's going to be, again, I said 2 parts.
Yeah.
And for the listeners, we're going to pick up on the experience factor. You said it just a minute ago. The next episode we have with Kevin, we're going to pick up on experience. You can find him on LinkedIn, as I said a moment ago, at WKevinWard. Follow him there. Follow the hashtag Wisdom Seeker and Wisdom Nugget. Follow both of those hashtags. Kevin, I can't wait for part 2 of this conversation. And again, I appreciate you joining me on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
My honor, my pleasure, brother.
My thanks as always to producer Bryce Sexton and technical advisor Matt Means. And of course, the ultimate thanks goes to the Lord Jesus Christ, who provides intentional encouragement every day through his word. If you're not subscribed to the Intentional Encourager podcast, hit the subscribe button wherever you get podcasts so you don't miss an exciting episode where you can get encouraged and stay encouraged. And remember, anyone, anywhere, at any time, any place can be an intentional encourager.